Good morning, guys. It's already 9 a.m., so let's get started. So first let us have a recap on what we have talked about last week. Last week we talked about while loop and break keyword and continue keyword. So what is a while loop? While loop is something like a for loop, right? So they are used to do some repetitive tasks that you want to do it over and over again, then you use a loop structure. So this is a template of the while loop structure. You need to initialize your variable first, and then you can have a condition for a while loop to check whether you are going to execute this while loop. And then inside the curly braces, you write your actual logic for processing. And then after you write all of your logics, then maybe you can increment some of your counting variable to control how many times this while loop will loop. So this is a while loop template. And it's actually the idea of it is a bit similar to for loop actually. But then when should we use while loop and when should we use for loop? Last week we discussed about it as well. So there's some intuition for this. If you know how many times you are going to repeat your loop and the times of repetition is limited, then it's better to use a for loop. Why is that so? Because in a for loop, for example, let me demonstrate it. In a for loop, you see, we can initialize our counting variable, and then there is a condition for a counting variable. There's a condition, and this condition might based on your counting variable. And then the third part is to manipulate your counting variable. So as you can see that for this kind of structure, we kind of already know what is the condition for running the loop and how many times this loop will be run. We kind of know it already. The number of loop is limited. So for this kind of situation, it's better to use a for loop, a for structure. However, if you have unknown number of repeats and the number of repeats is very, very dynamic, is conditional, then it's better to use a while loop. For example, last week during the homework session, we discussed about some of the use case of while loop, right? So for example, if you want to read an input from a user repeatedly until when the user send us something like 0, then we quit the loop. So in this kind of situation, we don't know when the user is going to send the quitting signal like 0. So we don't know how many times this loop will run. So in this kind of scenario, it's very, very dynamic, right? So it's better to use a while loop, and then we read in something, right? For example, while true, we keep letting the user to enter something. We read in something like it's called I. So if I is 0, if 0 means, let's say 0 means the user wanna to quit this program, then we break out of this for loop. We break out of this while loop, right? Then this program ends. So this brings us to the break keyword as well. So break keyword is a keyword for you to break out of your loop. For example, your for loop and your while loop. It breaks out of the nearest parent loop. Also, if you could remember, break is being used in switch as well. So in switch case, switch something, and then we have some condition case one, for example, you write some logic, right? And then we write, and then inside the logic we write break, right? So break is for breaking out of this switch logic. They are actually a bit similar, right? You see, they break out of their control structure. So in this sense, they are a bit similar. So this break and this break. This break is for breaking out a loop, while this break inside a switch is for breaking out the switch case. It's to breaking out the switch case. Okay. And then also we talk about another kind of special keyword for loop. It's called continue. So if let's say always we are going to print out I, right? So our logic is to print out I. So every time a user enters something, we print it out. But then there is a condition. Let's say if the number is a multiple of 3, then we want to ignore it. We don't want to print it out. So for this case, we can check if the number is a multiple of 3, then we continue. Just we run this loop. We go back to the start of the beginning of the loop. So this is the use case of continue. So we don't execute the code below it. We go back to the beginning of the loop, and then we try to read in a new input from user again. So see here we see the use case of break and continue, and yeah, that's basically what we have talked about last week. And then let's see what we have talked about last week other than that. Yeah, that's all that we have talked about last week. And then for this week, we are going to talk about array and maybe string. So let's start about array. So what is an array? This slides is not being translated yet, so it's in Chinese, but I will conduct my teaching still in English. So this slide is talking about C++ array. And what is an array? Array is actually something like a list. So think about if you want to store a lot of variable. So let's say just now, if we allow the user to keep entering we allow a user to enter some inputs, right? Like if the user enter more than one inputs and we want to store all of them, how can we do so? We need to store them in a list, right? We need to store them in a larger data structure. So in this case, we can make use of a very basic one. A very basic data structure is called an array. Also, is a built-in data structure. So let's say in this sample, let's say we need a variable to store the marks for all the students in the class. And let's say we have 30 marks. We have 30 students, so we have 30 marks, right? So in this case, how would you store it if you doesn't know the built-in data structure, the array built-in data structure? Maybe you will define 30 variables, right? So this is not a good way to do it. This is a terrible way to do it, right? It just doesn't fit our requirements. And a better way to do it is to make use of the array data structure. It's a built-in data structure in C++. So how can you define an array? In this case, we have an example here. We define an array with integer type, and the array name is called student test score. And then this array can store 30 elements, right? So array is, maybe the name arrays sounds confusing for you, but array actually is a list. A list means there are, we can store many things inside a structure. You can store many numbers inside a structure. For this case, you can store 30, you can store 30 numbers inside this list. But then in C++, this kind of structure is called array. The array provides a simpler way to achieve your above requirements, right? So now we can define 30, an array of 30 elements. And then now, so there's a tips over here. So it says that array is a set of data, and you can give it a name, and all the data, all the element inside this array, they have to be of the same type. So in this case, all the data have to be of integer type, right? And the template is like this, the format is like this. So you define the data type, for example, integer, float, double, long, or Boolean. So these are the data type, and then you give your array a name, and then you write a bracket. Inside a bracket, you put your array length. So length means how many data can be stored inside this array. And how much memory will it consume? For example, let's say if Boolean consume 1 byte of data, right? If you define 30 Booleans if you define this array as 30 Boolean numbers, then it would take 30, like 1 byte times the length of the data type, let's say is 1 byte times the length. Length will be 30. So memory space will just be a simple multiplication. So you just multiply the length of your data type times the length of your array. That would be the memory consumption of it. And how could we initialize an array? So usually for a single array, how do we initialize it? For a single variable, initialize it this way. So for example, we declare it, for this one, we declare it and initialize it in the same step. We declare integer n, and then we initialize it as 10. But in array, it's a bit different, right? Because you need to give it a lot of number. So for array, so here, for this line is declaring an array called name. And then immediately it initialize it to 0, 1, 2. And this has to be the uh this can be this is some so you cannot write something like dot dot dot. This is just sample, okay? You have to actually write all the numbers here properly. Cannot write dot dot dot. This is just sample. Okay, let's say we can define our array like this. We can try it out by ourselves. Okay. Integer name square nums equal nums equal 0, 1, 2. And then how could we print it out? Printing out using cout words. Let's see. Let's find out. See, it doesn't work. So it prints out the memory address of this array. So what we could do is that we have to look through all the elements inside the array, and then we print it out one by one. Okay. Integer I equal 0, I smaller than 3, I plus plus, then cout. Okay, if to refer to the data inside the array, we need to write like this. So it starts from 0. The first, let's say this is 10, 11, 12. It's easier to understand. So numbers 0 refers to a first element. Nums1 refers to the second element. Nums3 refers to a third element. This is usually how we do counting, at least in C++ or in most programming language. We start counting from 0. So we call this, the index for this is 0. So the position for this is 0. The position for this is first. The position for this element is third. So if you want to refer to it, you write the name of your array, and then write a pair of brackets, and then the position of your element. The position is 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, right? 0, 1, 2. So 0, 1, 2 prints out 10, 11, and 12. So what if we initialize our array like this? Is it allowed? Can try it by ourselves. So we say that, what does this one means? This is, remember, this is length. So that means you're declaring your array as with a length of 1. That means your array only supports storing one element, but you are going to store 3 elements to it. What would happen? So immediately it throws error. It cannot compile. It says that too many initializers for integer 1. So there are too many initializers. So if you define it as 1, you can only initialize it with one variable. Let's remove the excess one. And now we can print it out. And you see, when you print out numbers 1 and numbers 2, it print out some random number, right? So that is because those numbers are not being are not actually doesn't existed in this array. This memory space doesn't belongs to this array anymore. So they can be used by other structure, and they can have any other data. So their number looks very weird. So it's saying that, I think it's saying that you cannot initialize with more variables than you have declared. If you have only declared one variable, you cannot initialize it with 3 elements. Okay. And then what if you had give it a very long length, but then you initialize it with a few variables only? Is this allowed? Yes, this is allowed. The remaining one will be automatically be assigned a number 0. So let's say 10, 11. So our numbers array have 10 elements, and then we initialize it as 10, 11, and then the first 2 elements is 10 and 11. The remaining one are, we don't define them explicitly. If we print it out, so it will be 10, 11, and then all the remaining will be 0, right? And how could you, okay, here's the most important question, right? How could you store a value into this array? So this is how you store it to the array. This is the format. First, you write the name of your array, and then the index. Index is like the position, but we call it the proper name for it is index. So the index starts from 0. This is index 0, and then 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like this. So, and then we can assign the value we wish to assign is on the right side. So name index equal value means you're assigning a value to the element in this position, in this index. Let's say that we want to assign 12 to a third element, right? Nums, if you want to assign 12 to a third elements, remember the third elements is second index because we start counting from 0. So third element is second index, and then we assigned it as 12. And then later, if we print it out, the third element should be 12, right? Let's try it. Yeah. So the third element will be 12. Will be 12. And then how could we refer to the element in the array? How can we take the number out? How can we look at the number? So it's very simple, just like this. Array name and then the position. It's like this. Here we print it out, right? So the array name and then the position, you write your position inside the bracket. Your position is start counting from 0. So 0 to 9. Since we have 10 elements, so it should be 0 to 9, right? And then there's a sample over here. So here, we define an array called number, and then we initialize it with nothing actually. This is a short form. This is a short form for initializing and for declaring and initializing as well. So we can write our code like this as well. It's the same thing. Either you write it like this or write it like this, both works. So they initialize the first element as 9 and the fifth element as 7. And they print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. What would be the outcome? The outcome would be 9, 0, 0, 0, 7, correct? Because, yeah. And then there's a quiz over here. Which declaration method is correct? Declaration for an array. A declaration method for array is correct. Which one is correct? So first one, character name, MAY. So everything looks fine, right? But not really. So here they define an array called character. This part has no issue at all. But then this part has issue. You see, they write MAY here. So this looks like character, and they should quote their character in single apostrophe, like if you define a character, let's say they should quote it with some if a apostrophe. So the first one is incorrect. And then how about the second one? Float number 5 equal 1.02345. Is this correct? This is not correct also. Why? Be very careful with the syntax. So there is a typo over here. This shouldn't be a bracket. When you initialize your variables, you should wrap them in between a curly brace, a pair of curly braces. So this should be curly braces like this. Should be curly braces. how about this? Integer point equal 209972. This looks fine. This is correct. How about this? This is not an array, so it's incorrect because we want arrays declaration method. So this is incorrect. So the only correct one is the third. So there's another question. Given the below array, we want to print out a number with index 3. So it's actually super simple, right? Just write and then the bracket and then 3. Like and bracket 3, like this. Okay. And then there are some other questions as well. Later we'll go through it in the exercise session. And then next, we are going to introduce to you how to, like, for example, print out the array. Actually, we talked about it just now already. So since you already know array, and in order to actually make use of the power of array, we need to combine it with loop structure. If you are given 10 numbers and you need to store it into an array, maybe you would do it like this. You store it one by one, or you print it out one by one. See, there are a lot of repetition here. So in programming, repetition is usually not that good. If you found out you are writing a lot of repetitive code, so then it's probably better to combine them into a single function, combine them into a single logic. So for example, in this case, if we are storing them again and again for 10 times, it's a very, very bad practice. So for this case, we can make use of the loop structure, right? We loop through 0 to 9, 0 to 9, and then for 0 to 9, we do a logic processing. Like for example, in this case, we are going to print out the number inside the array, right? This is what I've demonstrated just now here. We print out the number in the array. And remember we talked about in an array, the index starts from 0. So if you are good in maths, or if you have some maths intuition, right, then you can know that if your array is have a length of n, then what is the index of the last element? The index of the last element would be n minus 1, right? So the index would be from 0 to n minus 1. From 0 to n minus 1 in total, there are n elements. In this case, when we know there are 10 elements, we should look from 0 to 9, right? Because the index are from 0 to n minus 1. N minus 1 in this case is 9. And also, this is a bit tricky. You see, the verbal for controlling the loop and the verbal for referring to an index are actually the same verbal. So this is a very tricky part, or a very smart part. And so sometimes you have to be careful with it, because maybe in your requirement, this index and the loop number are not the same. If they are not the same, you cannot do it like this. Maybe you have to you need to have another variable for an index, right? But for most of the simple cases, this kind of structure is enough. So we control the index and our counting variable for loop using the same variable. You see, it's very convenient. There are some more questions here. We go through it in the exercise session. Okay, we have finished talking about array. Next, we are going to talk about string. What is a string? If you could remember, I think already we worked with string many times. For example, during cout, we print out hello world, let's say hello world. This hello world is actually called a string. When you wrap your alphabets inside a double quote, if you wrap it inside a double quote, then it is those characters inside are called strings. This whole thing is called string. So how can you define a string? You can do it like string and then your name equal hello world. Let's try by ourselves. String name equal hello world. And then we refer to it here. Does it work? Let's try. So it works. So what can you store inside a string? You can use it to store any kind of verb, any kind of characters. For example, a people's name, a person's name, a song, or a paragraph. And before that, string is actually something more advanced. Maybe in later course, we'll talk something more about string as well. But for this lecture, we want the one we want to introduce is actually an array of character, right? So just now we talked about the normal array, right? But for character array, it's a bit different. So let's take a look. So here we are defining or declaring a character array. Inside this character array, they are storing let's say they are storing a string, right? They are storing a string. This string is called tomato. And the part that is different is we are storing at the end of this array, we need to store this backslash 0. This is to indicate that we have reached to the end of this string. So we must have this backslash 0. Backslash 0 doesn't do anything. It just is used to indicate that this is the end of the string, and it prints it's empty. It prints empty. So it won't print differently if you define a character like this. And you can actually ignore the length of your array, right? It's similar to other arrays usage. You can ignore the length of your array. And then if you ignore it, the compiler will automatically automatically calculate the length and allocate memory space for it. So you don't have to worry about that. And thus there's a tips here. It's saying that a character array is a type of string. right? String got many types. For example, this kind of, if we define it string using a string type, this is a very advanced string. For this kind of string, you can actually store Chinese word. You can actually store Chinese word, but for character string, for example, character string, yeah, yeah. In character string, we actually cannot write Chinese character. We print out. So it doesn't work because long ago already we mentioned that character is based on the ASCII, something like ASCII format. So it only supports 100 or 200 something different characters, and Chinese characters are not inside. Only English characters are supported, right? So we can use other kinds of characters here in character array. But with string is something more, is a more powerful structure. It can store many kinds of characters. And we'll talk more on it in later lecture, in another lecture. But for this lecture, the main focus of us will be on the character array. Also, there's a simpler way to define it. So we can mix everything together. We don't have to write it like this. We can mix everything together. And wrap it inside double quote. It's not single quote, this is double quotes. Hello. Yeah, it works, but still you cannot write a Chinese character here. This doesn't work. It couldn't understand. And if you wrap it inside a double quote, you don't have to explicitly write this \0. It will be automatically set for you. So you don't have to write \0 as if you define it one by one, then you need to add a \0. So as we have seen just now, there are two ways to define an array a character array, either this way or this way. Okay. And then actually there are more than that. All of these are allowed, are different kind of a different way to define your character array. So for example, the first one, you define a character array without length, but then they initialize it as a character one by one. And remember, have to add this back and have to end with this \0. And the second one, they give it a length. This is allowed also. And the third one, they initialize it using a string method is also allowed. And then the fourth one, they give it a length. Also is allowed. The fifth one, they doesn't give it a length, but then they doesn't use the equal sign. They initialize it in this way. So this is also allowed. All of these are allowed. So it's a bit dynamic on how you want to initialize your array or your character array. And is it character array is something existed in the C programming language. So in C++, has a data structure called string. String is something more powerful. So usually most of the time, if you are working with C++, we use string instead of character array. And in case if you have never heard of C programming language, so C++ is actually something like take a lot of reference or built on top of C programming language. So C is like a simpler version of C++, while C++ is a more complicated version with a lot of more modern syntax, with more complicated syntax and more libraries, more built-in functions. And then there are some questions. Maybe we'll go through it during the exercise session. So for this week, our focus is on we introduce array. So array is a list of is used for storing a list of elements, and they take up consecutive memory space. They take up a sequence of consecutive memory space. And in an array, we have an idea, or we have a concept called index. So when we store something inside an array, the index, or you can think about it as a position. The position of it starts counting from 0. So, and how can we initialize the array? Initialize it like this: integer, and then like your array type, array name, array length, and then equal to all the numbers or all the data you want to initialize with. And then when you wanna store something into the array or take something out from an array, that means you are going to refer to a specific variable, refer to a specific element. You write like this: your array name, and then with the index, the position number. And then when we look through an array, most of the time, the counting variable and the index would be using the same variable. For in this case, it's I. So this one thing that you need to take note of. And then also introduce character array. Character array is also an array. Why do we introduce it separately? Because character array is a bit more complicated to work with. So in an character array, when you initialize it with characters, you need to if you initialize with character one by one, you need to add it with a \0, right? That is what's special about this character array. Also, we can initialize it using something like a string. So it looks like a string, right? We are not initialize it one by one, like this. This initialize it one by one character, one by one. Or you can do it faster using this way in double quotes. And these are all the content for today's lectures. So today's lecture is mainly about array. And next week we'll introduce a double layer array, 2-layer array, or multiple layer array. So stay tuned. Next week we'll talk about more on multiple dimension array, so that you can store much more data. Because right now you can only store one dimension of data. What if you want to store something like a matrix? you want to store something with, for example, if you have a 2D screen, if pixel on this screen has each pixel on this screen has a color value, right? Then your data type is in two array. How can you store data type in two array? Then we need to make use of two-dimension array, right? Next week, we will introduce multiple dimension array. So stay tuned. And later, we'll go through the exercise session. So let's take a break for 5 minutes. We'll go back. We'll start our exercise sessions at let's start it at 9:55. Hello guys, it's 9:55, so it's our exercise session now. We'll go through some of the exercises in our platform. The first question, which array declaration method is correct? So already we discussed about it just now in the class. The first one is incorrect because the character have to be wrapped inside a single quote, have to be quote around a single quote. So this one is incorrect. The second one is incorrect because when you initialize the elements, those elements have to be inside curly braces. This should be a curly braces. And the third one is correct. The fourth one is not correct because this is not an array. This is a single variable called flag. So this question is about given an array. No, given an array n, print out the element with index 3. So this is very straightforward. Print out the element with index 3. And remember, the index starts counting from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. It should print out 86. Yes, it prints out 86. And for this question, there are three ancestors called with different names. We need to create something like an array to store their names. So please modify this program to implement this functionality. How can we do so? This is a fill in the blank question. Oh, so they're asking you to create an array called name with, let's say there are 3 elements, then we initialize it with 3 names. In this case, Chinese character is supported because our array data type is string, not character. If it is character, then it doesn't support Chinese character. So this is a string. And a third name. Yeah. So it works. This question asking about we want to allow the user to enter 10 numbers. After the user have entered numbers, display all the numbers separated by a space. So the user enter numbers, a sequence of numbers, and then we display it in the same line, but separated by space. So we need to read in 10 numbers and store it inside an array. How can we do so? First, we need to define our array. So here we define an array with integer type, and the array is called number with 10 length, with 10 data. In the beginning, actually, if you didn't initialize it, then all the data inside it will be the default value of this data type. For this data type, the default value is 0. So this number array, all of the element inside it will be 0. And then we want to allow user to enter 10 numbers. How can we do so? We need to make use of a loop. So in this loop, we loop through 0 to 10, and then we let the user to read in we allow the user to enter a number. And for that number, we actually stored it inside our array. For first time, if I 0, we store it in number 0. number index 0. And if I is 1, we store it in number index 1. So we store 10 numbers inside our array. And then later, we print out 10 numbers one by one separated by space. This is fairly simple. And how can we refer to the index in the array? How can we refer to an element in the array? We need to refer it by its index. And also, as you can see, the controlling variable and the index here are using the same variable. They're using the same variable I. They are sharing the same variable. Let's try this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 1 until 10 will be printed out separated by space. This question said that given a score with we have a score array of 30 elements. Design a program to calculate the mean value of all the scores. Here we can so already there's there's an array of 30 elements with total 0. Sorry, there is an array elements, and then there is already a total is being defined. This total is 0. And then the number inside the array is initialized. So we don't have to care about how they initialize it. And what they ask us to do is that into evaluate the mean value, the mean of these scores. How can we do so? We can add up all the numbers inside this array, and then later we divide by 30. This will be a mean. So from I equals 0, I lesser than our array has 30 elements, right? So 30, I plus plus, and then total have to increase by the score inside this array. Score inside this array, total. Oh, there's a typo here. Total. And you can run it. So the mean will be 79. Is correct. Next question. We know that there are 30. So there are 30 scores. And now they ask us to sort it. They ask us to sort it from ascendingly. Oh no, currently it's sorted in ascending. So design a program to print out the scores descendingly. So the simplest way to print it out descendingly is to print out from reverse direction, because it says that it's sorted ascendingly, right? So we can print it out in reverse direction. So I equal 30, while I greater equal 0, while I greater equal 0, we should run it, and then I minus minus. Print or cout score I separated by space. Or it should be 29, because The last index is n minus 1, which is 29. This is correct. Also, another way is we can try to sort it as well. We can write the sort algorithm to sort this data. How can we do so? So for this requires some kind of algorithm. So for example, if we search online, let's say one of the simple sort algorithm is called bubble sort C++. Okay. In bubble sort, so let's let's say we are going to try bubble sort. In bubble sort, we keep comparing the adjacent elements. If let's say we are trying to sort it ascendingly. If for example, when we are comparing 45 and -9, and if -9 is lesser than 49, then it should be swapped, right? It should be reversed. So to make it ascending, so we change 99 -9 to this position and 49 to this position. We swap their position, and then we repeat this for like n times. After n times, you'll see that all the elements inside this array is sorted. Let's see whether there's some visualization. Mhm. Yeah. Oh, this one is simpler. Our array value is ct. Ct 32 minus 1, 4, 3, 7, 9, 5, 6, 7, -5. We want to sort it ascendingly from small to large. So in bubble sort, always we compare two adjacent elements, ct compared to 32, and then index 1 compared to index 2, and then index 2 compared to index 3, until index 6 compared to index 7. Starting past 0, neutral list, compare element ct and 32. If 32 is lesser than ct, we should swap it, right, to make it ascending from small to large. So swap it, and then later we compare the index 1 and index 2. Or for this case, it's not this. Okay, this is bubble sort. For bubble sort, 32 is comparing to, wait, and then 1 compared to 2, yeah. 1 compared to 2, so 1 is lesser than ct, right? So swap it. And then 2 compared to 3. 3 is, and this element 4 is lesser than ct, so swap it. And then this 3 is still lesser than ct, swap it. 7 is lesser than ct, swap it. 9 is lesser than ct, swap it. 5 is lesser than ct, so swap it. And then this round is complete. Now we do a second round. 32, 0 compared to 1. 1 is lesser than 32, right? So swap it. And then keep comparing. And then have you find the pattern. So after the pattern is after every round, the largest element will be at the last, and then the second largest element will be at the second largest place. So they are sorted, but the front area is not sorted yet. Now we compare 0 and 1, 1 to 2, swap it. See, after a third round, the last three elements are sorted. And we keep running this again and again for X times. Then all of these are sorted. So bubble sort is one of the simplest sorting algorithm. And how can we write this in C++? We can make use of a for loop. So for I equal 0 to n minus 1, and then we need a second loop. A second loop is from 0 to n minus I minus 1 to n minus I minus 1 means because the last I elements is sorted, so we don't have to care about those I times that we have already. We don't have to care about those last I elements. So we loop until n minus I. And then in this J, always we compare two adjacent elements. Means first we compare 0 to 1. Later in another loop, J become 1. So we compare 1 and index 1 and index 2. And then when this become 2, we compare index 2 to index 3. So we are always comparing adjacent element. And then we can, if the adjacent element doesn't match what we want, then we can swap it. Like swap it ascendingly or descendingly based on our algorithm. And this one is to repeat it for n minus 1 times. After n minus 1 times, the last n minus all the elements are sorted. So we just have to sort it. We just have to run it for n minus 1 times. We can write our own sort. So we can write our own sorting algorithm. I lesser than n minus 1, I plus plus. For j equals 0, j smaller than n minus I minus 1. Why? Because in ith round, the last I element is already sorted, so we don't have to loop until last I. And then j plus plus. If score I is smaller than score, we want to sort it descendingly. Remember, we want to sort it descendingly. Small less than score j. Swap. Swap is a built-in function. We can swap. Sorry, this is j and j plus 1. We want to compare adjacent element. Swap these two elements. N means, in our case, n is 29. n minus 1 at 29. That's integer n equal 29. N equal 30, n equal 30. And after all of this, prints out score I. I equal 0, I smaller to 30, I plus plus. So if this algorithms works, if it sort our array from ascending into descending, then we can print out from index 0 to 30, and it should be sorted descendingly. Yeah, it works. Now our array is sorted descendingly. And so if you are interested more on sorting or on bubble sort, you can check on this. You can actually look online to search for like bubble sort in C++ or bubble sort visualize, and there are a lot of explanation or resources online. There are a lot of other methods to do sorting as well, other algorithms. If you are interested, you can check it out. This question is very straightforward one. It's saying that there is a typo in this string, and you should update this string to fix the typo. How can we do so? Given this character array, we want to change the first element. The first element would be the 0 one. So my array 0, change it into C. Yeah, it works. And then there is another question. There are entries on xi. This is there are entries on xi lesser than xi plus 1. And what is the distance between each of these adjacent trees? So if there are 5 trees, the first tree is on position 0, the second tree is on position 1. Let's say this is 0 meter, this is 1 meter, this is 3 meter, this is 7 meter, this is 8 meter. So this tree, the nearest tree from this tree is 1 meter away, let's say. And the nearest for this tree, the nearest tree is one distance 1 meter away. The right side is 2 meter away, so the nearest one is 1 meter away, so 1. So for 3, the nearest tree is 2 meter away. For 7, the nearest tree is 1 meter away. For 8, the nearest tree is 1 meter away. So now we need to allow a user to enter a number. Actually, we need to allow a user to enter a number n, and then we will store n trees repeatedly. And then we need to run our logic processing to run our algorithm to check to find out for each tree how near is there, what's the nearest tree, what is the nearest tree from them, and what is the distance. So we need to store n numbers. In this, for this, first we need to define n, and then we read in n. Like for example, if user enter 5, we read in 5. And then we define our array, with length n, so that we can store n trees. We can store 5, for example, we can store 5 trees. the position of 5 trees. And then we read in, because we know how many times we are going to read in, right? From 0 to n. So for this case, we can use 4 instead of what. And then we read in all of these position, and then we store it inside our array. Our array is called distance. Let's say our array is called distance. And now it comes to the logic processing part. We need to determine what is the nearest tree for each of these three. So we look through we look through the 0 to n, and then we check the left distance of a given tree and the right distance of a given tree. Right? The left distance means distance I minus distance I minus 1. And the right distance means distance I plus 1 minus distance I. And then we calculate the minimum. Right? To calculate the minimum, you just need to compare. If left is less than right, then tag left, otherwise tag right. This is the minimum. And then we print out the minimum. And this is the algorithm behind this question. So 5, 0, 1, 3, 7, X. You should print out 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. Yeah, correct. Submit. And then this question is also very straightforward. So it's saying that it will enter n, and it will enter a number n, and then we need to look through n time, because they are going to enter n. They are going to enter an array of numbers d and array of numbers v. And then this is actually something like a physics question. So if you know you just need to know the formula for it. So it's something like d times v. So you need to times densities I times volumes I to get the answer. So this is actually very straightforward. We read n, and then we read an array of densities, we read an array of volumes, and then we look through both array at the same time. This is a special part. We look through it both of them at the same time. They are using the same. You see, we are controlling them through the same index. So densities I times volumes I, like densities 0 times volumes 1, densities 1 times volumes 1. So that we want to make something like 1.0 times 6, 1, and then, 1.6, and then 0.1 times 6, and then 1.5 times 6, and then 2 times 6, and then 2.2 times 6. This is the idea behind it. Oh, there are still a lot of questions here. Which declaration method is correct? So the first one is definitely incorrect. The second one is correct. The third one is incorrect because there is no data type called A. The fourth one is incorrect because there is no data type called array. Right? The data type is like integer, floats, doubles. There is no data type called array. For array initialization, which one is incorrect? Integer A with 10 elements, and then is assigned a variable. This is correct. This is also correct. This is like a simpler version, like a shortcut version. There's without the equal sign. This is also correct. The third one is not correct because you define it as with a length of 1, but then there are 3 elements inside. So this is not correct. The fourth one is correct. And how many high will be printed out? Given list 5 equal 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. For I equal list 2. List 2 means 0, 1, 2 means 3. So I is initialized as 3. And while I is lesser than 5, prints out high. So 3, and 4. So this will print out when I is 3 and 4. So we will print out twice. It's 2. And then for this question, what is the result? What will be printed out? A10 equal 1, 2, 3. While AI prints out AI in I plus plus. So our AI initially AI is 1 because in index 0 AI is 1. 1, remember 1 is converted into true. So that means while true. So this will be executed. Prints out AI. So 1 AI is 1, right? So 1 will be printed out. And then I plus plus. When I plus plus I equal 2. Now, so oh no, when I plus plus I equal 1 now. When I equal 1, AI is 2. 2 still converted into true. Only 0 will be converted into false. 2 also converted into true. So if it is true, this will be printed out as well. So print out true, 2. And then later, another loop, print out 3. And then when I equal 3, A3 equal to 0. Because remember, if we didn't initialize the remaining variable by ourselves, it will be assigned as a default value, which is 0. So if A3 is 0, that means 0 converted into false condition. So this won't be run. And thus, what will be printed out will be just 1, 2, 3. And that's all. Yeah. For this question, they're asking that they enter 2 array, and then they want you to print out the sum of the 2 array. The first element, add the first element. The second element, add to the second element. How can we do so? We need to define 2 array. And then we read in the first array, and then we read in the second array. And then we go through the 2 array at the same time. You see, we're controlling them using the same index. And we just add them together. And it's pretty much straightforward, very straightforward. Which one is incorrect? On character declaration. Character A equal to cool. This is supported, is correct. This is supported as well. This is supported as well. This is supported as well. So all of these are correct. Actually, you can refer to our slide. Here in our slide, it mentioned that so many methods are allowed. And then let's skip this. And if you are interested, you can do it by yourself in the platform. But you need to have access to a platform, you need to subscribe to our package. And pretty much that's all for today. So to recap, today we talk about introduce the array data structure and the reason why should we use array, why in what kind of situation would array be helpful on. And also introduce character array, and because character array is a bit different from those common array, from normal array. And as you can see, as we have demonstrated in our exercise session, array is something very, very powerful. It allows you to process many kind of logic, to store many kind of data. And next week, we will continue on more on array. We are going to talk about maybe two-dimension array or even multi-dimension array. So stay tuned for next week. Thank you for listening. This is all for today. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.